A mě se nebrání to pustit a zkusit, jestli všechny slyšíme, no.
All right, let's go. Shall we? 1, 2, 3, good. All right, ladies and gentlemen, you could have already read a short history of Commodore over there on the slide. Now I'd like to introduce our guest. Basically, David is a musician turned top exec turned writer. As I got to know him over the last 2 days, he's a bottomless well of absolutely fascinating stories. He's an incredibly kind man who agreed to come to ByteFEST and do a Q&A with us. Ladies and gentlemen, the last CEO of Commodore, David John Pleasance.
Thank you. I'd like to start by saying a massive thank you, because I think it's an honor to be invited here to meet with you people. I mean, I've always been a person who believes that life and business is about how you meet and treat people and how they meet and treat you. And for me, meeting people like you, who were the backbone of what made Commodore what it was, that for me is fantastic. And I spend a lot of my time, not in the last year and a half, of course, but I spend a lot of my time coming to events like this and meeting new people, because I think the people that have taken Commodore to heart, we have a community, a global community, which is massive. And I've never known anything like it in my life. For something which is 35, 40 years of age, to have this community of support is absolutely incredible. So thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it. How I like to do these things is I like to give you a little bit of an overview of things for me in my early days, which brings me out and tells you how I ended up at Commodore. And then basically after that you can open up to questions and anything you want to ask me. Don't be afraid to ask anything, it doesn't matter, except my underwear size, I guess, you know, which is too big. Yeah, my career is really quite amazing what happened to me. I'm going to go right back to when I was about 14 years of age, and my parents took me on holiday with my 2 younger sisters. We went across to Holland and had a week holiday, and it opened my eyes to such a degree that the following year, at age 15, in my summer holidays, I hitchhiked around Europe. I just had to travel. It was something that got into me. The following year, I saved up. I worked all summer season, and at 17, I decided to leave England, leave my family, and I travelled to Australia, which was pretty much an amazing thing to do at age 17, to be honest with you. I had no idea what was going to happen to me. And like any teenager, young person, I landed in Sydney and I did anything I could to make a living. It didn't matter what it was. I spent 6 months as a bus conductor in Sydney, which was amazingly funny, some of the things that happened. I had been apprenticed for a while in the sheet metal work industry, and I happened to be quite a good welder. And so a job became available at British Leyland Motor Corporation in Sydney for welders on the production line. And of course I hadn't got any qualifications because I'd only been an apprentice for a short time. But one of the things I learned from Australia is that they have this expression, bullshit beats brains. So I went and I got in the queue to apply for a job as a welder on the production line. And the guy who interviewed me said, "Where's all your papers?" And I said, "Oh, they got lost. I'm still waiting for them to arrive from the UK. "Oh, you can't come in here then." I said, "Well, look, hang on." I said, "Put me on the line. I'll work for a week. If I'm no good, get rid of me. You got nothing to lose." Yeah, that's a good idea. Now, the interesting thing there was that on that production line, I was part of a team of 14 people, and I was the only person, including the team leader, I was the only person who could speak English. Every nationality working on this production line. Anyway, cut a very long story short, I ultimately moved up to Queensland. It's a warmer state. And as a young person, like everybody, I'd been trying to play guitar and I couldn't do anything. I was hopeless. And what happened is I happened to go to a folk club one night. And it was a guy got on stage and he started to play flamenco. And it absolutely blew my head away. I'd never seen anything like it, I heard anything like it. And I just got obsessed. So I started to go to him for lessons. And I'll tell you the truth, 5 days a week when I was working, I was practicing 12 hours. And on the 2 days a week when I wasn't working, I was practicing 16 hours a day. It was something I got obsessed with. I don't understand why, who knows. The net result was that within 14 months I was playing in a restaurant and getting paid from nothing. So I ended up for the next 2 or 3 years as a professional musician. I had my own two girl dancers and a singer, and we did cabaret, did lots of television in Australia. It was really good. Anyway, I came back to the UK from Australia because I wanted to go to Spain to study more. And in the meantime, my parents had moved away from where I was born to a whole new town. And my father, who was an electronics engineer, he had bought a shop, and he was repairing televisions. This is in the days when, if you remember, the colour televisions came out. They were massive, heavy things, and they were completely unreliable. So he used to repair these TVs and things. Anyway, I got a job. The town we were in was a place called Shrewsbury, and it has a very highly regarded, very expensive public school. And I got the job teaching guitar there 2 days a week, which was very good for me because it's a very high prestigious school. I ended up with about 30 private students who used to come to me at my house for lessons. I was playing in a restaurant 2 nights a week, and with my dancers and singers, we did cabaret at various times as well. And then maybe every 3 or 4 weeks, if I had the chance, I would go up to London and have a lesson. I studied with a guitarist called Paco Peña, who's quite famous. And I had no intention of staying in England, but I met my first wife. And my life was bliss. We went to Spain together, and we drove down. And anyway, we came back to the UK, and then one day she said to me, "David, I want you to get a real job." And I was sat there thinking, what the hell can I do? You know, I'm a qualified bus conductor. And I had no idea what I could do. And that was really quite traumatic, if you like. And anyway, 2 or 3 days later, because I used to go into my dad's shop and help him a couple of days a week. My dad, when I was about 3 years of age, he was on the back of a motorbike and they got smashed in by a car, and his knee was smashed. And in those days, they had no artificial kneecaps. So he was crippled, really, from that point. And I used to go in the shop and help him to carry televisions and things around. Anyway, within 2 or 3 days of my wife saying, "Get a real job," a guy came into the shop and he said, "David, come and have a coffee with me." I said, "Sure." And he said, "Look, my name's Phil Evans." He said, "I'm the manager of Practical Credit Service, which was a financial entity that provided the finance for people to buy things like televisions or radios or anything that my dad used to sell. He used to provide the finance for it." And he said, "Look," he said, we're growing, our business is doing well, and I need to get myself an assistant manager." And he said, "I'll come into the shop and I see how you are with people." He said, "Would you like the job?" Like 2 or 3 days after I've been told to get a job, I was offered a job, which is really amazing. Anyway, again, cut a long story short, I wanted to go back to Australia. My first wife, of course, had never been there. So I went, we went back to Australia, and I worked for 6 months for the Building Society. But then I got a job with a company called Charge Card Services Limited. They were called Bank Card. And these are the days in Australia before there was Visa or MasterCard. They weren't in Australia. So the idea was that they were going to launch the first mass market credit card in Australia. So 11 banks got together and formed this company. And they had most of their employees were lent from the different banks for 3 months, 6 months, or whatever. But I was one of 4 permanent employees there, and it was a fantastic time, really was. The day came, and I was there about 5 years, and the day came, I decided I wanted to start to sell tangibles, not intangibles, just for the benefit of my career. So I joined 3M Company, and I'm sure most of you know 3M is one of the largest companies in the world, 87,000 products they have. And I had a really good time with them for about 4 years. And I was doing a lot of, they gave me the most unique position because a lot of the products that they had were industrial products. But I was a consumer specialist. My expertise is selling into retail stores. And so they said to me, look, we've got all these products. Some of them might be suitable as a consumer product. Do what you want. So, for example, they had this product which was called Nomad Matting. And how that came about was that the mafia in the States went to 3M and said, look, we have a problem. Every time we open a new nightclub or a new casino, and we put all this brand new carpeting down, and noticed that within a few days, the carpets were in the right mess. And so 3M did some research, and they determined that when somebody comes and wipes their feet on a standard mat, they leave the dirt behind and go in. The next one comes in, picks it up and takes it in. So they developed this product called Nomad Matting, which is made of loops. So it's like a plastic product. And when you stood on it, all the dirt fell to the bottom. Now, that was available as an industrial product. So I took it and made it into a doormat size for homes. And we sell it. So we sold it to all the retail stores. So that's an example of the kind of opportunity I had to market how I wanted to do things. They also, of course, 3M are very famous for their Scotch tapes in those days. That was the big thing, cassettes. And they launched the world's first metal particle tape called Metafine. And I relaunched a whole range of cassette tapes, with Metafine being also the ultimate. And I produced a booklet, and the booklet was called Scotch Tapes, The Truth Comes Out, which if you think about it is a very clever way of what's coming out from the cassette. And what I did was I did promotions with the hardware people, like Hitachi and Toshiba and that, who had the cassette players, and the retailers, and then us with it was software, hardware, and the retailers. And of course, by doing promotions where you jointly pay for it, you get a lot for your money. That was so successful that in fact I was offered a job, I was poached by Pioneer, and I was made sales manager for Pioneer. And I was with Pioneer about just under 2 years, and I'd got my first child, my eldest son, and we decided we were going to go back to the UK. So what we did is we went to Thailand for 2 weeks holiday, and then I put my son and my wife on the plane back to the UK, and I spent the next 7 weeks traveling the world to find what was going to be the next big thing. And during those 7 weeks, that's when I discovered, I thought, in my mind, home computing is going to be huge. So I came back to the UK, and in those days, no internet. So any jobs that were available were on the newspapers. Thursdays was a big jobs day, and Sundays. And all I knew absolutely nothing about computers, and I'm a dumbass, okay? I started to look for any job advertised that had the word computer in it. So I remember there was a job advertised, I think it was for computer services, but I can't really remember. Anyway, I got on the phone it was an agency in London, and I got on the phone, and it took me about 30, 40 minutes to persuade this guy to even give me an interview, because I knew nothing about computing. But I got myself an interview. And as I arrived at this place, I can see it like it was yesterday, there was a lady leaving, and I remember holding the door for her while she came out. The guy came up to me who was interviewing me, and we sat straight down and we had the interview. And after about, 25 minutes, this guy said to me, look, Mr. Pleasance, he said, I know you could do this job that you've come for, you could do it standing on your head, but I'm not going to put you forward for it. I said, oh, thanks a lot, No, he said, hear me out. He said, the thing is, he said, your retail background is the best I've ever seen. And he said, as as a responsible recruitment consultant, it would be wrong of me not to utilize those skills that you've got. So I need to find you something that will utilize those skills. And he said, did you see a lady leaving a few minutes ago? I said, yeah. He said, well, you're never going to believe this. He said, but she's just given me a brief. I've not even had the time to write it up because she left and you've come in. He said, it's a job that I think you would be perfect for. And it was Commodore. Now, come on, guys. Isn't that a fluke? So 2 days later, I'm having an interview with her. Eileen Stroud, her name was. And three days later, I meet the managing director of Commodore, and I started with Commodore. I didn't even know that nobody knew the job existed. They hadn't posted the job. So I think that's an absolute fluke. So, my career at Commodore, I can tell you in all honesty that within a few months of me being there, I already knew that they were destined to fail at some stage. Why do I say that? Well, because as a business, they never had a business plan. They never had a business plan. Can you imagine a company producing products like that they had with no business plan? And to justify what I'm saying, that I was recruited specifically to sell their business products, which in those days were the Commodore Pets, into the retail market. They wanted to open a new market. They had not been selling into retail. And so when Eileen had gone to this recruitment consultant, she said, we don't know, shall we get a computer specialist who knows nothing about retail, or a retail specialist who knows nothing about computers? And he said, you definitely want to get a retail specialist because anybody can learn a product, but you know, the whole idea of how retail works, you need that. And I was absolutely ideal for the job. So, my very first day, so funny, there was a new person in charge of business systems in the sales manager. He'd only started probably a few days before me. His name was Mike Tate, a nice guy. So anyway, I arrived and he was sitting on his desk and I sat here and I said, what do you want me to do? He didn't have a clue. He did not know what to give me to work. And then I got the measure of him very quickly because his secretary came in and she was Spanish of origin. And so her and I had a connection immediately because of my interest in flamenco and stuff. Anyway, she said to Mike, I'm going to the supermarket to buy some tea and some coffee. Do you have a preference for what tea? And in front of me, he picked up the phone and he rang his wife and he said, darling, what tea do I like? Can you imagine that? I mean, even if he had to do it, you wouldn't do it in front of somebody just sat down in front of your desk. Anyway, that for me got the measure of him. But so what I did was I excused myself, and then I went and I found this guy called John Baxter, who was at that time he was Commodore's marketing manager. I said, look, John, my name's David Pleasance. I've just joined Commodore today. Have you got anything for me to do, please? He said, there is. He said, there's a big new store just opened up on the North Circular Road of London. It's a big store. He said, I've been meaning to go and have a look at it, but I've not had the time. He said, go and check them out. And come back and give me a report. Fine. Jumped in the car, found this place, big place. As I walked to the door, the guy approached me and he said, who are you? I said, I'm David Pleasance, I'm from Commodore. From Commodore, come in. And he put a glass of champagne in my hand. And I thought, I'm going to love this job, this is amazing. And what it turns out was that it was their open day, and they had officially sent invites to Commodore and other companies, but Commodore hadn't responded. It was just complete coincidence I walked in on that day. So that was how I started. Anyway, I then decided I'm going to do my own thing about how I take this role on. So I said to my boss, look, I've been out of the UK for 5-6 years now, and even though I know the retail market very well, because I've been out of the UK, I'd like to just research the market a bit, go in and see the stores and what they do and how they do it, so I can determine who will be the best people to start trialling with the new product. And in the UK, there was lots of them. There was Comet, Dixon's and Curry's and all these big companies with loads of shops. But there was one chain of stores, they were called Lasky's, and they had 54 shops across the UK, But within those shops, they had this store within a store called Micropoint. And they were selling business things like typewriters and some software and stuff. They weren't selling computers. Nobody really was. But to me, that seemed a logical choice to go with. So I went to their head office. I met their managing director, and I said, look, I'm doing some research for Commodore about a new product that we want to launch. And would you give me permission to talk to the managers at each of the Micropoint stores? I said, fine. And I got a letter authorizing me to do so. So I've done 23 stores. I'm in the 24th Micropoint store out of 26. And in those days, there was no mobile phones. So I got a phone call from Eileen, the girl that actually recruited me, in that store. Luckily, I was where I was supposed to be. And she said, David, do you remember in our interview, I told you that things happened quickly in Commodore and there were some exciting opportunities? Yes. She said, well, you know, we launched the 64 about 3 or 4 months earlier, no, 7 or 8 months earlier. She said, it's going crazy, and we need somebody to look after all the major stores for the 64, and you're it. And that's completely out of the blue. And I said, well, can I just finish the last 2? No, you're not on that anymore. It turns out that Commodore International never had enough product in the PET form for me to open a new channel. They didn't have enough product supply. There's the evidence of them not having a business plan. I was recruited to do something that never came to fruition. The other thing I found out about Commodore very quickly is that, you know, they're an international company with a very complicated structure, which I'm happy to tell you about. But they never had any external auditing. So you've got Commodore UK, Commodore Germany, Commodore France, Commodore Italy, and they were all doing their own thing. They were all reporting their own sales and so on, but they had no auditors. So they never knew if what they were being told was accurate or not. They were reporting the figures, but nobody checked to see if they were true or not. And there were some pretty bad operators around, particularly Commodore Holland was notorious. The guy was absolutely crook. He's dead now, so I don't mind talking out of turn, but the guy was an absolute crook. He used to brag, when we all got together in a meeting, he used to brag that every quarter, the day before the quarter end, if he had not reached the figures he'd forecast, he would invent invoices. He would put product on a truck and send it on a journey for 5 days. And then so he recorded the sales, and 5 days later the product came back into stock again. But Commodore International thought they'd made all these sales, and of course they hadn't. So there's another example of how Commodore was like Rocky. They were always short of money because of this. They didn't have any hold on what was actually happening. Anyway, what happened to me was the guy who actually was the sales manager for the consumer products division, which I'd just been moved into, he didn't like me. And the reason he didn't like me is because he didn't pick me. You know, if you need staff, you normally do your own interviews and you pick whoever you want. He was told, we're not allowed to hire anybody from outside, freeze on hire. So if you want somebody, you've got to take somebody who already works for the company. That's how I got the job. Mind you, I was well experienced for it, don't get me wrong, but he didn't pick me. And he made my life quite a hell, actually. Not long after, we had a new MD come in, a really, really good guy, Nick Bessie. He was from IBM marketing, really smart guy. And he said to me within a couple of days, he said, I want to go out on the road with you. I said, okay. So he said, meet me at the office here tomorrow at 9 o'clock. I said, no, why? I said, tomorrow I'm going to be in Manchester. I've got a meeting with the co-op. And if you want to meet me at 7 o'clock, that's what I made him do. Anyway, we're driving along, and Nick says to me, okay, he says, tell me the truth. What's going on? You know, what's happening? And I said, shall I tell you what you want to hear, or shall I tell you the truth? He said, I only want the truth. I said, okay. I said, well, Paul Welch, he was my boss. I said, our customers hate him. And Nick Bessie said, oh, you must be exaggerating. I said, I'm not. I said, I don't really know why, but I can tell you that they really don't like him. And that makes it difficult for me. So I think he thought to himself, I'm exaggerating. We arrived at this appointment with Co-op, and the marketing director of the Co-op came to meet me and sign me in He said, hello, David. And the first thing he said was, you haven't got that bastard Paul Welch with you, have you? And Nick looked at me as if to say, you've set this up. And I swear to God, I had no chance to set it up. The appointment was made like weeks before, and Nick Bessie had only asked me the day before, so I couldn't have set it up. So Nick said to this guy, he said, why did you just say that? And Peter, the marketing guy, he said, Paul Welch is never going to set foot in this building again. So Nick said, why? He said, because, he said, you guys are supposed to be taking some product back from us. It was all been agreed that we could balance the books. He said, and he's been promising me a credit note for months. He said, and I met with him 2 weeks ago here in this very building. He said, and I was just about to go into a board meeting, and I got him, and I said, and Paul Welch promised I would have the credit note. So he said, I went into my board meeting and told my board, and it hasn't arrived. He's not setting foot in here again. Again, cut a long story short, I hadn't been there long enough to have taken on that role. I didn't put myself forward. He got rid of Paul really quickly. Good thing to do. There's a relevance there because later on, Paul turns up selling Atari. And he became my competitor, and that's another story. But anyway, cut a very long story short, I started to be able to make inroads by doing things that nobody else had done. For example, the Commodore 64 started to, sales started to go down. We put them into packs, into bundles, and we made them something that people wanted to buy. And we kept the 64 alive for 2 years, longer than it really should have been alive. But that's what we did. We were very good at what we did. And then the opportunity came when we had the Amiga 500 released. There's a lot of things happened in between, but I'm just going to give you the major points. When the 500 was released, I had another new MD come in, Steve Franklin. And Steve was from the business systems background, and because I was consumer, they called us the toy boys because we were the consumer products. And when he came in, he fired except for 2 people, he fired all of our business systems salespeople, got rid of them, and brought all his own people in. He didn't speak to me for 2 weeks, not one word, for 2 weeks. It was really eerie. Anyway, he came in that third week, he said, Pleasance, my office, no. Sat down. He said, David, there's no easy way to say this, he said, but if I knew anybody at all who understood your side of the business, you wouldn't be here today. I thought, thanks a lot, for your confidence. He said, no, he said, I don't know anything about you. He said, but I've been brought in and I've been told to change the whole ethos of Commodore UK. I don't know why, because it wasn't bad, in my opinion. But anyway, he'd been told to change the whole ethos, so he brought all his own people in. So he said, seems I'm stuck with you. He said, these are my rules. And he spent about 20 minutes talking about honesty, integrity, and all the things that I lived by my whole life. So when he'd finished, I said, I'll tell you what, Steve. I said, I'll make a deal with you. Am I allowed to swear? He said, you're in no position to make a fucking deal with me. How dare you? I said, no, hear me out. I said, I'm going to make a proposal to you that if it works, I'll bring you more business than we've ever seen in our life before. If it doesn't work, then you have a reason to get rid of me. What do you want to do? So I pointed, there was an Amiga 500 sitting on the desk. I said, what's that? He said, it's a fucking computer. I said, yes. But I said, what it really is a piece of plastic with some keys on it. I said, have you got any idea how difficult it is to market a piece of plastic with keys on it? I said, what I want to do, from now on, we do not sell computers, we sell dreams. What I want to do is I want to put the best bundle you've ever seen together with the Amiga 500 and we launch it. And I told him basically the principle of what I wanted to do. He said, okay, give it a try. So I sat down with my team. I had 6 people that worked with me. And I said, we sat and we said, okay, what's going to be the next best game? What's going to be that's coming up? And everybody agreed that it was going to be Batman the movie, because that was coming out as a full screen movie and everybody was hot for it. So I went to Ocean Software, they'd just come back from Hollywood, and they'd paid $1 million for the license to use the name. $1 million. Big gamble. So I said to these guys, I said, look, gentlemen, I'm going to give you a proposal now that you will either have the balls to go with, the guts to go with, or you'll send for men in white coats to drag me away to get locked away. what do you want to do? I said, right. I said, when's the game going to be ready? And they said, we estimate it's going to be September. Okay? I said, what I want to do, I said, I want you to give me that game exclusively for 2 months. From the day you release it, you can't sell it across the counter. It's only available because I want to put this pack together, which is Batman pack. The fact that there's an Amiga inside is incidental. There was a picture of the Amiga one, but it wasn't featured. It was about Batman. I said, basically, I want to pay you very little for it, and I only want to commit to 10,000 pieces. So the first thing I said was send for the men in the white coats, because you're crazy. And then they talked about it, and they said, look, David, we've got some concerns. They said, first of all, our concern is we think our dealers are going to be really angry that you have this product for 2 months, they're waiting for it. And I said, look, if what I believe is going to happen happens, they won't be angry for very long, because they'll be selling a £400 product instead of a £40 product. As a retailer, I know what I'd prefer to sell. Okay? They said, we've just spent $1 million. We've estimated the game is going to cost us $1 million to make. And so therefore we've done all of our numbers, and we estimated how many we can sell and so on, in order not just to get our money back, but to make a profit. I said, and we're afraid that this activity will affect those numbers. And I said, look, bear in mind, I've got a much bigger marketing budget than you have, but my marketing budget is going to be on your product, essentially. So anyway, the net result was that they had the guts to go for it, which I always respect them for, because it was a complete challenge. And the result was, my prediction was exactly right. The dealers were angry for 2 days, and then suddenly they're starting to make sales at £400. The numbers that Ocean had estimated of sales, they did 5 times more than their highest estimate, so they were very happy. And I didn't take 10,000 pieces from them. I ended up with taking 186,000 pieces, because that's how many Amigas we sold in 12 weeks. I mean, that's astounding. I mean, we couldn't believe the numbers. It was just went absolutely wild. And the reason I'm telling you that is because that put me at a level within the company where people started to listen. And I ended up getting promoted to sales and marketing director. But not long after that, there was a job came up with Commodore Electronics Limited, which was the holding company for the whole of Commodore. I'll briefly give you the overview of how Commodore's structure was, because I think a lot of people don't know this. Commodore was founded and registered in the Bahamas for tax reasons. It then listed itself on Wall Street. I don't know how they did that, but they did, and that got investment in from the general public. But they also founded Commodore Electronics Limited, which was based in Basel, in the canton of Aish. And I was made general manager of that. And that was, the reason was that in Aish, you paid 0 tax. So everything went through, where it came from around the world, it went through Aish. So I saw everybody's expenses and everything across my desk. But my responsibility at CEL was to look after all the countries where we didn't have an operating office. So I was looking after 35 countries. And I loved it. I mean, it's going back to my love of travel. So I would travel, and I would stay over weekends at my own expense wherever we went. If I'd go to Istanbul, I'd stay there over the weekend, pay my own expense for the weekend, and enjoy it there. And then I'd go from there to Helsinki or wherever else I was going. It was a fabulous time, 35 countries. All through this, I'd been saying to Mehdi Ali, why don't you let me into America? Because America is dead. We were doing so little business in the States, which for a US-based company is crazy. Anyway, one day I was in a general manager's meeting with Mehdi Ali in Frankfurt. He used to hold his meetings either in Frankfurt or in London. And I was in Frankfurt, and it was about 11 o'clock in the morning, up as 11. I got up to leave, and he said, Pleasance, sit down. He said, I'm going to give you your wish. I said, I've got a lot of wishes, Mehdi. Which one are you talking about? He said, no, he said, I want you to go to the States. He said, as of now, you are Vice President of Consumer Products. He said, the President, Jim Dion, thinks you're going to be reporting to him. Just pretend you are, but you're not. You're reporting directly to me. He said, and I want you there today. This is at 11:30 in Frankfurt. So he said, I want you on the 7 o'clock flight out of London, no excuses. So he said, go upstairs to the office and get them to book you on that flight. What he had obviously forgotten was that the 7 o'clock flight out of London was Concorde. He used to travel Concorde all the time, and for him it didn't even occur to him. So I got to travel Concorde once, which was an amazing experience. Anyway, cut a long story short, I get to the United States and I find out they're not selling anything. I had my team of consumer people, and I sat them down, 3 reps, a couple of marketing people, and I said, why aren't you selling anything? And they said, we're not allowed to. What do you mean you're not allowed to sell it? We can't, we've been told not allowed to sell anything to anybody. I said, why? And they said, we don't know. Oh, okay. So I said, look, I have to get to the bottom of this. So I said, make some appointments for me. And the first appointment we made was Sears, big, and I remember being at, I think it was the 14th floor of Sears building in Chicago. And so I was with the rep, Steve Salas, and there was about 10 guys from Sears around the boardroom table. And so I introduced myself and said, look, I'm David Pleasance from Commodore, been with Commodore about 8 years, and la-di-la-di-la. And I said, gentlemen, what I'm here to do is, I said, for some reason, business seems to be stagnant. I'm not quite sure why. But I said, I'm here to try to sort things out, because you guys should be selling product in big numbers like we are in Europe. And I said, the first question I said, it turns out that they're not paying their bills. That's why the admin had told the reps, you can't send anything because they owe us money. So I said, would you mind telling me why you're not paying your bills? And they said, well, Mr. Pleasance, we're just waiting for you to come and take all our stock back. So I said, well, that's strange. I said, I've been with Commodore 8 years and I've never known us to be a lending library, which is based. And so they pushed this piece of paper across the boardroom desk to me. And it's a letter signed by Jim Dion, president of Commodore Inc., the sales company. And it was sale or return, which we never did. But not only was it sale or return, it was on a product that Sears couldn't have sold in a million years. Nobody could sell it. It was a CD TV, which was a product that was so ahead of its time. If you didn't have a degree in science, you wouldn't be able to use it. And if you imagine the people in like Sears, they were lucky if they could ring something up on a till and put it in a plastic bag. That was the capacity of them. And I'm not being detrimental, but that's the truth. They should never have had a CD TV. So it turns out that Jim Dion had done this everywhere. All the big retail groups in America, Jim had sold a sale or return, but not told anybody. So there's an example, as I refer back to, where because we didn't have external auditing, nobody knew. Mehdi Ali didn't know. All he knew was that we're not selling anything in the United States, didn't know why. So that absolutely shook me. I didn't know. I thought I was stuck for a minute. What am I going to do? Because it's all in writing. You've got to honour it. So I said to the guy, I said, look, I said, honestly, I said, you should never have had this product. It's completely wrong for you, and it's definitely our fault. And as I gave you my word, I will take the product back and I will sort it out. I said, however, a couple of things. First of all, I don't really want to start my career in the United States with a big negative on my books, through no fault of my own. And I said, and the truth is that you should never have had this product. What you should be having is Omega 500, because that's selling, and that's the sort of thing you could sell. I said, how about I'll give you a credit note for all the stock, and you give me an order to the same value of Omega 500s, and if you do that, I'll give you your own pack. I'll make Sears' own pack. So I managed to get out of it that way. The funny side of that was that come the end of the quarter, I'm actually on holiday. I've got my 2 sons, I've flown them out from the UK, and I had a boat down not far from Philadelphia, and we were down on the boat for a few days. Again, we had no mobile phones in those days. So anyway, Mehdi got hold of me, because it was that every quarter end you have a meeting to review what's done in the quarter and what you're going to do for next quarter. And of course I wasn't at that meeting because I was on holiday. So I had given Jim Dion was representing me because he was supposedly my boss. So Mehdi Ali gets on the phone shouting at me, what the hell's all this money? I said, what are you asking me for, Mehdi? What do you mean? I said, talk to Jim Dion. I said, ask Jim to give you the envelope I gave him. So which he did, and of course he opened the envelope, and inside his copies of all of the sale of return agreements that he'd done. I said, here's the guy who's responsible. I've just sorted it out. Yes, it's a negative. Yes, it's not growth. But if we don't do this, we're never going to do any more business. So we had to, draw a line in the sand, and that was it. I'd love to have been the fly on the wall then. I wasn't there. But anyway, I sorted all the retail market out in the United States, and it sounds like a big, bragging thing, but the truth is I did, and we got trading again with everybody. So then I went to Mehdi Ali, and I said, for the moment, Mehdi, my job here is finished. This was about October, November, I'd say about 11 months. He said, what are you talking about? I want you here. I said, no. I said, I've sold into the retail stores their stock. If they want to buy more, let them buy more. But I don't want to sell them anymore. Why is that? I said, Mehdi, you and I both know we've got the Amiga 1200 coming very shortly. And if I load them up with 500s, they're going to say, take them back for the 1200. But if I leave them and they buy that, they reorder, they can't have that hold on us. You see about thinking ahead? Do you understand? So anyway, I left there and went back to CL, although I was operating out of the UK. And I was back in CL for a short time. And then, I'm in Athens. I've just signed a new distributor in Greece. And I had the mother of hangovers from being out with this guy the night before. Hangover. And he rang me. It was about 6 o'clock in the morning in Athens. I got this raging hangover. And he said, I want you on the plane. You're back in the UK. You're taking over as MD. No excuses. Be there by 10 o'clock or whatever it was. So I went back to the UK. And I wasn't given an option. He basically said, Commodore International is in trouble. We need cash flow, big time. He said, I've always known you did the business in the UK. You built the business. He said, I want you to take over and run it as MD. And I said, look, if you need cash flow, the best thing in the world is, I said, yes, I can read a balance sheet and stuff, as I can. But that's not my forte. My forte is sales and marketing. And I said, I'd like to share my MD-ship, co-MD, with a financial person, which happened to be Colin. So he became co-MD with me, and we were a fantastic team. I didn't even know him, but we were a really fantastic team because our ethos was the same, and we managed to get ourselves out of trouble by being upfront with our customers and saying, we need cash flow every day. If you can send us cash every day, that's what we need. Anyway, then of course we had the issue with the CD32, which had been planned for release the following spring, early summer. And so Mehdi comes to me, I think it was in August, and he said, I'm going to release the CD32 this side of Christmas. And I said, you're crazy, you can't do that. He said, what do you mean? I said, I've got orders for the 1200 coming out of the yin-yang. Everything we can make, we've got sold. You bring out the CD32, that's going to kill that market. Oh, no, we want the extra money, we need it. I said, Mehdi, it's not going to happen. I said, this was the first properly planned launch of ever in Commodore. I said, I've given all of the major software houses with whom I had a great relationship development kits, and they were all writing software specifically for the CD32, which would have been ready for the planned launch spring, summer. And I said, if we launch before Christmas, they'll just port what they've got, and people, when they buy it, they're going to buy the CD32 instead of the 1200, and they're going to be disappointed because the software doesn't show you any advantage over the 1200. See, all this logic absolutely insisted. No excuse, you've got to launch it. And exactly as I predicted, the CD32 had pretty good sales, except we couldn't get enough of them. That's another story we're talking back to. The 1200s would kill dead. The dealers wouldn't take the orders that they'd placed because they knew it wasn't going to sell. So that was like shooting ourselves in the foot. It was a stupid thing to do. It really, really was. But I guess more than that, the whole ethos of Commodore, because it was run by people who had no knowledge and no interest in the business. I mean, you would think, with my experience being at Commodore all those years, I was at Commodore 12 and a half years, they never once came to me and said, what does the market want? Tell me, describe a product and what specifications should be, what price point, so that we can work towards it. Never once asked the question, which I think is insane. If you don't ask your frontline troops, what do they need to win the war, you're never going to win the war. So for me, all of those things were absolutely crazy. Anyway, kind of long story short, Colin and I, we tried to, we did a bid to buy the worldwide assets of Commodore. We had a fantastic business plan because, as you can tell from me, we knew what we were doing, and we raised $50 million in 94-5. Now, you try raising $50 million today, it's like impossible. The reason we did was because we had a fantastic business plan of what we were going to do with Commodore and with Amiga assets. And we ended up getting cheated out of it. The $50 million that we raised, we used an accounting firm called Coopers & Lybrand, a very good company, who were specialists in management buyouts and raising finance. 25 million of our 50 million was coming from two high wealth individuals, one guy who represented several high wealth individuals. Between them, they came up with $25 million. The other $25 million was coming to us from a company called New Star Electronics, who were a Chinese manufacturing company who had been ripping off Sega and Nintendo products for years, never paying them anything. And they'd been told by the Chinese government, you've got to get legitimate because we want to join GATT and all these other things. So that, for us, it was the most perfect match, because if we'd have had a partner, 50% shareholder, who was also the manufacturer, you're going to get the best deals, and it's going to be the cheapest products, and we wouldn't be relying on other people. But about 48 hours before the auction, the guys from ESCOM got to them and said, don't pay them 25 million, we'll give it to you for 5 million or something like that. So they stole that investment from us. And that meant that we were not in a position to bid. Now, a lot of people said, well, you still had 25 million, why didn't you bid? Because it sold for 15 million. I mean, they offered 14 and it got raised to 15 million. And I said, that's because we have, but nobody else has factored in that we need cash flow to keep the business going from when we first take it over. Because do you think all the suppliers to Commodore who've just been burnt badly are going to give us credit terms? Of course they're not. They know, they want us to prove ourselves, so we're going to have to pay cash up front. And we figured out that it would take us 7 months and I think 2 weeks to get to the point where we could be self-sufficient. So we needed the $50 million to run the business. Otherwise, we'd have bought the assets, say we bought them for 16 million, and then we'd have been bankrupt in a few days because you can't run the business. We were thinking ahead all the time. And so obviously, from my point of view, when Commodore sold to ESCOM, I couldn't believe it. And they didn't even know what they wanted to do with Amiga. I mean, we went to them. Colin and I went to ESCOM. We flew over to Germany to meet up with them. He said, look, Commodore UK is not in the bankruptcy sale because we were still trading and we were close to bankruptcy, but we weren't. Because we'd kept trading. As every other subsidiary of Commodore went under, with no supply from their head office, we bought all the stock and kept trading, because we were trying to do a management buyout. And so we went to meet up with the ESCOM people, and we said, really, you should buy Commodore UK as a going concern. And they said, why should we do that? I said, well, first of all, we know the business. All the staff, they know what they're doing, and you can hit the ground running. So the other thing is that we have £6 million worth of tax credits that you can utilise. So it means they can probably turn over 18, 20 million before they have to pay any tax by utilising Commodore UK. Anyway, Manfred Schmidt, who was the owner of ESCOM, he said, I'll only buy Commodore UK if me and Colin came with it. And we didn't want to work for him at all, So we said no. He said, okay, well, I'm not going to buy it. He said, so you'll have to go back to to the UK and you'll have to tell all your staff they're all going to be out of work because you wouldn't work for me. And Colin said, that's exactly why we don't want to work for you, what you've just explained then. So anyway, obviously, ultimately, Commodore UK finished. And for me, that was more or less the end of it. And what was interesting is, I mean, I was really battered and bruised because we'd done so much work and the business plan was exceptionally good. And we lost out through no fault of our own. So I got out of the industry completely. I just didn't want to know. So I changed my life completely. I remarried, I went to Dominican Republic, I went to Australia, I bought a restaurant, ran the restaurant for 5 years, and various other things. Had nothing to do with the industry whatsoever. And then several years later, in fact 2015, I got an email. By then I'd come back to the UK yet again. And I got an email inviting me to be a guest speaker at Amiga 30 in Amsterdam. And I can tell you, I walked into that place, I didn't even know what I was going to say. It had been so long. And I was swamped. All these people coming, can I have your autograph? Can I have a selfie picture with you? What are they talking about? You know, I swear, I had no idea. It seems that for some reason, because of the work I did at Commodore, and yes, I did put myself forward as in profile, and one of the reasons I did that in the UK was because people used to say to us, oh, Commodore's a faceless company, you know, you don't involve yourself. So what I did, I cooperated with 3 or 4 of the magazines in the UK. There were 13 independent magazines in the UK, and between them they had over 500,000 circulation every month. It was incredible. So I did, for example, I'd do a column, and people would write in with questions, and the following month I'd answer them. So I kind of was the face of the UK at that particular time. So, but anyway, I walked into Amsterdam, and I just couldn't believe it. I was seen as some kind of a rock star. It was really bizarre. And my life has changed completely since then, because I've now got to meet so many people in the community who, you know, for some reason hold me in very high regard, which I'm very humbled about. I don't know that I've really earned it, but, you know, who knows? History will tell, won't it? So that led me to, because I was telling stories just like I am now about things that happened within Commodore, things that you wouldn't believe. People kept saying to me, you should write about it, you should write about it, write about it. And I thought, well, I'm not an author. I've got no idea about how to write a book. But in the end, I was kind of badgered to do it. So I started to write Commodore, the Inside Story. And when I'd finished my part of it, I read it back, and I didn't like it at all. I thought it was more a story about Commodore, about David Pleasance than it was about Commodore. But then I thought, well, actually, it can't be anything else because I'm writing it through my ears and my eyes. But this isn't enough. So what I then did is I contacted loads of other people who were within Commodore. Dave Haney, for example, probably one of the best engineers that Commodore had. R.J. Michael, who was part of the Amiga project. Beth Richards, she's the girl who designed the CD1200 that never got launched. And all these different people who I knew, and they all did their own chapters, but all from the inside point of view. So the book became, it's a wealth. I know I shouldn't say it because it's not really my book, it's a group book, but I brought it to market. And the fact is that without having any distribution at all, I ended up selling 2,500 books just online and at meetings like this. Now I've got a publishing deal, and now the books are going to be in the stores and that all around the world because they realise it's a book that has interest to a lot of people who maybe not in the community, but remember Commodore 64 and have an interest in that. Then again, once that book was released, I thought, well, that's it. But then people started telling me all the stories about what happened to Commodore after I was not there. So I got persuaded to get involved, to do a book about the aftermath of Commodore from when ESCOM bought it. And so I contacted several people who would be involved in the story. And one of those people was Trevor Dickinson, because he's obviously got A on technologies and is involved. So, and I said to them, would you contribute something to this book? And Trevor came back and said, not only will I contribute, how about I co-author with you, because I've got loads of material that I've already got about these things. And so it made sense to me, so Trevor decided to co-author. So I did a Kickstarter, and what I said in the Kickstarter was, my plan is to do a book equal size and quality of the inside story, so you know what you're going to be getting. The truth of the matter is that we had no idea what we were starting to uncover. There was so much information, some incredible stories. The bottom line is that I had filled the book, 360 pages, the same, more or less the same as the inside story, and we'd only got from 95 to 2004. We still had 5 and up to 21 to put in. So we had no choice but to announce a second volume. So that's currently being written. Volume 1 only released in the last few weeks. I've literally just shipped hundreds and hundreds of books, and I'm worn out from it. But so volume 2 is being written now. And if I'm honest with you, we should have a volume 3 because there's so much information that's coming out. And it's an intriguing, because you'll find some of the technology that was being developed had nothing to do with home computing, but it would have brought Amiga into a completely different marketplace. But it never quite happened. All these people have got all these ideas, which some people were just doing it for a quick buck, which is why the book is called From Vultures to Vampires, because we got all these vultures just wanting a quick buck. And then, but in spite of all of the lawsuits and things, there's great technology coming out. And the Vampire, I'd seen that 18 months ago, Vampire 4 particularly. So it was the perfect title for the book. Anyway, so as we are today, I've got the volume 1 is now available, and also volume 2 is being written. My guess is, to be honest, that volume 2 will not be this side of Christmas, mainly because the printing times. In November, December, all the printers are up full because they've got all the Christmas market to cater for. So I'm not going to promise volume 2 will be before Christmas. My guess is likely to be about February, something like that. So that's where we are today. And I mean, there's lots of other things I can tell you, but if I open the floor to if anybody wants to ask me any specific questions about people or products or anything, please do.
We can pre-order the volume 2 here.
Yes. Yes, of course. Everything is on my website, davidpleasance.com, and you can order anything there. But what I'm trying to do with these boys is, I shipped over ahead a few books, but not enough. I think it was more or less sold out. So anybody who wants to order any more, we'll do a joint thing, and I'll send them in bulk because it's a lot cheaper to send them. It's like €9 for one book because they're over a kilo in weight. But if we put a lot of books together, which I will sign before we sit. So anybody who wants to order books, of course you can. And I think it's the most efficient way to do it, and then you can get it from here. Hmm? Yes?
I have a question. You said that you couldn't believe that ESCOM bought Commodore assets and they didn't know what to do with Commodore or with Amiga. Did you feel something like a satisfaction after ESCOM bankrupted?
Oh, absolutely not. No, I mean, Commodore was my life. I can't. I'm sure you can feel it in the way that I talk about it. I loved working for Commodore. I couldn't wait to get to work every morning. I mean, it's very lucky to be in a position where you actually find something that is so right for you. And all I wanted was for Commodore and Amiga to be successful, one way or another. And the thing is that we could never understand why a company like ESCOM, who were PC, in fact, they didn't even know what they were they a manufacturer, were they a distributor, were they a retailer? Because they ended up buying all these retail shops. And it's like, if you don't know your own identity, how can anybody else know your identity? So they outstretched themselves. They spent all this money buying shops instead of keeping an eye on the market. What I said to them was, I said, look, I think you're absolutely right to buy Commodore, and particularly CBM, because the trademark CBM at one time was as powerful as IBM. And I said that it would make sense for you you've got your own range of ESCOM PCs, but you have a higher level of spec which is CBM, and you market it and sell it at a higher price. But what on earth are you going to do with Amiga? It doesn't fit in your profile. But I think they did it out of spite. I don't know. Really strange.
At the time, Commodore was also producing PCs, their own PCs.
Yes.
Was Emscom interested also in the PC production line, or they absolutely didn't care because it was a competition for them, I think?
No, I mean, again, that's another example of the confusion that Commodore had. Now, as I said, I went to America, and it was 1992. I went to America as vice president. And my first day I walked into the office, I went to see all the engineers, because I believe without the engineers we haven't got a business. So I went to see them, and guess what? There were seven Amiga engineers and 40 PC engineers. And this is 92, when nobody was making their own PCs. They were buying them from the Far East, cheapest chips, their own badge, their own label on them, what have you. So I need to find out why we got 40 engineers. Well, what had happened is that Mary Alley had recruited a new head of engineering, a guy called Bill Sidness. And Bill came from IBM. And his claim to fame was that he was responsible for the PC Junior, which is considered to be the biggest disaster in computing history, right? So the reason why we had 40 PC engineers there was that when he took over as head of engineering at Commodore, he gave jobs to 40 of his mates. That's the only reason. Now, however you look at it, it doesn't make any commercial sense to do that. Why would you have your own, why would you design what everybody's designing in their droves? It doesn't make any sense at all. So, I mean, I think ESCOM was right to have nothing to do with it, but it's crazy.
I've heard the last question, my third one. Do you still have some old Commodore computers, and if so, what do your children or grandchildren think about this? Or are they interested, or they don't care?
I have two sons. They're both grown up now with their own children. They used to love it that I'd come home with something new. But I've got a confession to make. I did an estimate a while back of an envelope of the number of computers I have personally sold, not my team, not me personally. And I think I've sold about 2.2 million computers. That's everything from VICs and 64s and plus 4s and you name it. I never switch one on. I don't use them. And that might sound shocking, but the truth of the matter is I believe that if you're a technical person, you've got a certain brain that understands that, it's a completely different ethos to a marketing person. I mean, the reason I was successful in selling is that I didn't sell features and benefits. I said, this is what you'll get from it. This is what it looks like. If you want to know how it does that, I'll bring in somebody who can tell you. If you want to know the squidges and the what's-its and that, I don't know that. But this is what you're going to be buying. And that's how you market. There's no question about that. You've got to give people an incentive to buy. So you'll notice that in all the packs that we did, whether they were 64 or... We even did a pack for PCs, a retail pack for PCs, and I'll go back onto that later. But what you will see is that we always featured top games, because that was the catalyst for the children. But we also always had some productivity software, word processing, art, or whatever, because that gave the parent the justification for spending the money. But my big question has always been, I go to Mediator, we were so successful in selling those packs, and I used to say to Mediator, why don't you make Commodore Germany, Commodore France, Commodore Italy do the same? Because it works. Look at the volumes that we're selling. But he wouldn't do. He had no, I guess, control over. People did their own thing. Every single subsidiary got their own marketing money. They got, I think, 5% or 4% of their turnover. And they were allowed to spend it whatever way they wanted to. Now, I remember having a meeting with Mehdi Ali. I'd just come back off holiday. I'd been to Spain. And I went in to see Mehdi. I said, look, Mehdi, I took my wife and 2 kids, we went to Spain. As we arrived at Heathrow Airport, there's this great big sign from Sony and a message. So when we landed in Malaga, there's exactly this sign in Spanish, but this is global branding. said, why aren't we doing that? Everybody was allowed to do their own thing, and they had all different designs, and the money was wasted. I said, just imagine. I said, let's say Commodore UK produces a pack, and when we produce a pack, we prepare all the artwork in different languages. And then you send the artwork to each of the country. They get the boxes printed there locally. And then when I go to do a deal, I don't take 10,000 pieces. I can go 100,000 pieces and get an even better price. And then we do a television commercial, and we do it in multiple languages at the same time. And the money that you would save would be phenomenal. But they wouldn't do it. Weird. I'll tell you another story. You'll like this story. When the Commodore 64 was obviously in its last throes, people just weren't buying it anymore, I went to Mehdi Ali and I said, Mehdi, I need a product to replace the 64. Because that socio-economic group, the people who could afford to spend £200, who can't afford to spend £400, I don't want to lose them. So I said, why can we not produce a low-cost basic Amiga that you can add to and build it up so that people can afford an entry level? And so I came up with the idea of the Amiga 300, and it was all agreed, I thought. The next thing you know, I got shipped 20,000 Amiga 600s. Now get this, if you're an Amiga 500 owner and you see Amiga 600 being advertised, you immediately think it's an updated, a better spec product, right? That was good. But calling it the Amiga 600 was complete nonsense. So people stopped buying the 500. And then I find out that not only is the A600, the name is wrong, it cost more to make than the 500. So the idea of having a low-cost produced product that we could replace the market, because it makes perfectly logical sense to get to that. I said, those people that spend £200, I reckon we can get them to spend 249. They'll stretch that a little bit more. So let's do that. So instead they launched a 600, which meant to kill the 500 sales. And the 500 we were making money on, the 600 we were making not hardly any money on. But the most annoying thing was that when you looked at all those 600s that came in, all on the motherboard was A300. So they'd changed completely the concept and what the ideal, which I still believe would have worked really, really well. They changed that completely to something that we killed ourselves. We shot ourselves in the foot, killing the Amiga 500 market. How can you understand that? Doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Crazy.
David, I have a question about local Commodore UK structure. Why I'm asking, because I have few products with the label Made in UK. I'm wondering, were they really completed or bundled in UK, or how it worked? Do you know?
Yeah. What happened was that I joined in June of '83, and I think it was mid '84, thereabouts. I can't remember exactly. We moved. We bought a 10-acre site in the UK, 10 acres big, and we built a purpose-built structure. So it was warehousing, marketing, distribution, and an assembly plant. So we were assembling. We weren't manufacturing, but we were assembling. It saved some import taxes by bringing the components in. So at one time we had 580 employees in the UK, and it was a perfect situation. But then what happened was that one of the new guys that came in under Irving Gould, who was the major shareholder, remember Jack Chamil, who was the founder, he left in about March of '93, and so we had these people coming in that Irving Gould employed. One of them was from Coca-Cola, and anyway, they're told, we're not making any money, cut costs. So instead of closing down the old factories like Braunschweig and Hong Kong and Singapore, he closed us down, which didn't make any sense. We got a £5 million grant from the local council to build the thing there. So we went overnight from 580 people down to 13, can you believe? But so there was product assembled in the UK. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
David, what was your view, or Commodore UK or Commodore globally, to the fall of the communist parties over the Europe? Or was there any impact on the sales from the new countries like Czech Republic, Poland, and other?
Yeah, well, it's a good question, because that's exactly the time when I was at CEL. I was looking after 35 countries. This country was one of them, Poland was one of them, but I couldn't sell into them at the time. There was just no way to do that. But Commodore Germany, who were actually whores, they would sell anywhere through the black market. They didn't care. So it did affect me, but I actually left CEL in January of 92, so I was there 90 and 91, and didn't really have the opportunity to get a foothold into this country or into Poland. So we saw it was an opportunity, but by then Commodore seemed to have lost interest in the CEL countries. I don't know why, because I mean I took CEL from 5 million to 50 million in the 2 years that I was there, by working with the people and setting up a legitimate business. Because I'll give you an example. In Turkey, I had a distributor in Istanbul, and they would buy from us at the very lowest possible price, because they had to warrant everything, they had to do all their own marketing and all of that. So if you don't give them the lowest price, they can't make it work. But then what would happen is they would have their own dealers and they would sell a network. But then Germany would dump a whole lot of product into Turkey through not the right channels. And then if you didn't do something about it, my legitimate distributor would end up having to warrant things that didn't come in, they'd not been responsible for getting the revenue for. So, for example, I took 3 or 4 guys and we went over to Istanbul, and we took every serial number that they'd taken, made a list of them. And then so I said to them, any machine that comes in that isn't one of these serial numbers, you can tell them to head off, because they didn't buy it through you. But if you don't do that, if you don't have a clean marketing and distribution channel, then why would they want to buy from it? If people can undercut them because they haven't got to pay for the warranty or anything like that. So Commodore didn't have clean laundry, let's put it that way. And so the Germans were just, all they'd do was sell, they'd sell 3 40-foot trailer loads of 64s or Amigas into a market. They didn't care what happened to it. Just get their figures, get the commission, and carry on.
Amiga 3000 desktop was produced in one edition called Unix. Do you have any remembering about that time? There was a rumors that Commodore was talking with the Sun Computer to produce low-cost Unix workstation.
Commodore talked to a lot of people, but when you got somebody like Mehdi Ali, who was at the helm, he was the world's best sale prevention officer. I think that's the best way I can describe it. He was incredible. I'll give you a really good example. You won't believe this. I got a call from the guys at Signosis. Remember Signosis?
Yeah.
Great product. And it was Ian Hetherington and Jonathan Ellis, the two co-MDs, and they rang me up and said, "David, can you get Mehdi Ali to come up and see us?" Ooh. Anyway, I managed to. I dragged him up to Liverpool from London. He was arguing all the way. And then Ian sat down with him and said, remember, I'd put development kits into all of these people, so they were working on the CD32. They knew a lot about it. And Ian said to him, "Look, Mehdi, I've looked at the technology, and if you make this change and you change that widget for this one and that, you're going to have a much better product." Now, most people, like me, who was a technical dumbass, would say, "Look, you're talking over my head. I don't understand it. Can I get our technical engineers to talk to you?" Mehdi didn't do that. He lost he thought he was being talked down to. Because being a little short man, he must have been all of his life, defending the fact that he's a little short Pakistani or whatever. This is not racism. But anyway, cut a long story short, he got really angry, and I had to end up kind of dragging him away. Now, not long after that, Psygnosis get bought by Sony, bought by the whole thing. Ian Hetherington, who was giving us the information, was appointed head of Sony PlayStation. He was offering us the technology that PlayStation had used for free, because he loved us, he loved me and the relationship we had, and Mehdi just screwed it up. There's a good example of sales prevention. Amazing.
We have time for like 2-3 last questions.
I would like to ask you, you mentioned that you sold Commodores in Europe, in the US, were they sold somewhere else, for example, South America, Africa, or Asia?
No. We had no market in most of those countries. I don't know why. See, that, again, that's a very good question, because that begs the question. We have no business really in the Far East. We did years ago, but in the the more recent years, no business. So I had to say to myself, if we've got no business in the Far East, why are we building a manufacturing plant in the Philippines for the CD32? It's 5 weeks by sea from your major market in Europe. Technology doesn't wait 5 weeks. We all know that. I never understood why would we build in the Philippines, and I found out why. Mehdi had just recruited a new head of manufacturing. I don't even remember his name, that's the truth. And he said, forget what we've got in Hong Kong and Singapore and all of that. He said, you want to produce in the Philippines, whatever reason he gave. The real reason that he insisted we do that was that the company that we had recruited him from was based in the Philippines, and he had his mistress there. That's the reason why he got Commodore to put their money into the Philippines. I mean, come on, guys. You've got to admit. Amazing.
David, I have a question about ESCOM. You told that ESCOM that they did not know what to do with Amiga. Mm-hmm. But at some point, they probably started to find a way what to do with it, because if I remember that correctly, and if that wasn't some rumor, I hope that it was a true story. They were developing some new computer, which was like next Amiga. It looked like, by design, like a toaster machine. Evolker. Do you know something about this computer? What was the purpose or target? If it is meant like some console or real computer, and some backstory about this.
I know a little bit about the Walker. To be honest with you, it was nicknamed by everybody who knew anything about it as the wanker, because it was just a complete and utter waste of time, right? But again, you've got to understand, I mean, I have a very, very love-hate relationship with Petr Tichenko. I hate him. He's the guy who stole our investors from us, and why wouldn't I hate him? But I can tell you this, that in the days when Commodore UK was doing all of these bundles and making loads of sales, because he was Mehdi Ali's bag carrier, every time Mehdi came to Germany, he would carry his luggage for him. He was known as Mehdi Ali's bag carrier. His real responsibility in Commodore, he was head of product logistics, which meant that if I ordered 10,000 Amiga 500s to be delivered for this quarter, he had to make sure I had them, right? He had no responsibility for sales whatsoever, thank God, but he used to claim that he was responsible for all the sales, which is complete rubbish. To show you how talented he wasn't, when we did the Batman pack and we sold 186,000 machines, which we hadn't predicted, of course, I had not forecast enough peripherals, enough monitors or drives or anything to go with it, because you always order a percentage of what you're likely to sell. We never expected to sell 186,000 machines. But I needed monitors because, they're a big sales value. So anyway, he was told, get some monitors to the UK. So what does he do? He finds monitors in Australia, and because they're 240 volts, the same. And he air freighted 300 or 400, 500 monitors, a massive expense, to the UK for us. But they're not compatible because they have to be rewired. The polarity's wrong. It's the opposite polarity. So you'd have to rewire every single one of the tubes. But he didn't know that. I mean, so the reason I'm saying that is that he used to, every time I had a meeting with Mehdi Allen, I was talking about, Mehdi Allen would say, you spent all this much money on software, and I'd say, we're into this pack, and that's what we got from it. And Tichenko used to chirp, and he used to say, yeah, what a waste of time all that is, because nobody else did it, but we got the sales. The first thing that he does when he takes over at Amiga Technologies is he recruits two of my people. He recruits John Smith, who's not only my best friend, but really great salesman. And he recruits Jonathan Anderson, who was the guy who got all the people to do the artwork and all of that for the packs. And he produced a pack. The first thing he did is produce a pack that he was saying we shouldn't be doing. Gives you some idea of the depth of the man. It was as shallow as a pond. But anyway, as far as the Walker's concerned, I mean, there is only one of them, and he's trying to get somebody to pay him 20,000 for it or something. He's been trying to do that forever. But it's a nonsense. I think that we did develop something with Unix based. But again, that was really not in my area at the time, because as I said, I was concentrating on the consumer products, if you like. Unfortunately, there were so many projects that were started by the engineers that they weren't allowed to finish. Somebody new would come along and say, what you do? I'm doing this, and oh, you don't want to do that, do this. So there's all these unfinished projects, which is a story of Commodore's life, really. And in the book, The Inside Story, there's a chapter by Beth Richards. She is the girl who did the design for the CD32, for the 1200 CD. And she talks about how many projects that they worked on that were never finished. And it's really quite interesting. If you've got a limited resource, which Commodore obviously had, wouldn't you think you'd control it? What that resource, where should we put that resource? Because that will give us that, and that will give us these sales, and that will. But they never did. It was just like somebody wake up one morning and think, oh, that'd be a good idea, and just go and tell the engineers to do that, without thinking about it, without any research, no market research whatsoever.
Sorry, guys, I'm going to steal the last question. David, could you share the Sega story, please?
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, it is a good story, I have to be honest. As I said to you, I was forced to launch the CD32 early, much against my wishes. I tried so hard to fight against it. But anyway, I was committed to it. So I got my marketing team, and we booked the Science Museum in London to do the launch. Which was a fabulous thing, clever thing to do. Anyway, about 3 weeks before the launch, there was an article published in a PC magazine where Tom Kalinske, who was the worldwide president of Sega, was interviewed. And the interviewer said to him, as part of the interview, what about 32-bit based CD consoles? And he said, can't be done. If anybody could do it, it would be Sega. And this is like 3 weeks before we're launching, right? I mean, it's like, thank you, God. And then on top of that, obviously we always knew we were going to use that. But on top of that, about a week after that, this guy rings me up and he says, oh, David, I don't know if you remember me. He said, we've done some business together before. He said, my company, we've got all these big poster sites all around the UK. He said, and you've used us before. He said, and you know how we work. He said, when you book a site, you pay 50% up front, and then when your time comes, you pay the other 50% and your posters go up. He said, I've got 3 sites in central London, great places, that somebody's already paid 50% on, and they're not going to go ahead. So if you want them, you can have them for 50%. Oh, and by the way, one of them is right outside Sega's head office. Right. Thank you, God. Anyway, I didn't come up with it, but I don't know if you know, Sega's advertising used to be this good takes ages, to be this good, and they spin the word ages around, take Sega. Very clever, really clever advertising. So we put a sign up that said, right outside the office, said, to be this good will take Sega ages. And they weren't very happy, but they couldn't argue because it was their boss had said it in print. And it was amazing because, we had no internet then, but that went viral. Everybody was talking about that. And there's a picture of it in the thing in the book. But yeah, that was, and what, as an adjunct to that, a few weeks later, I think it was November or December, every year we used to have an industry dinner. Because in those days, the industry was fantastic. It was small, you knew everybody. I mean, I knew Nick Alexander, who was MD of Sega, and in the daytime we'd be competitors, at night time we'd have a drink at the bar. It was like that. Anyway, we were at this Indian, it was called, at Christmas, where we all got together and we raised money for charity and stuff. Anyway, I'm there, I've got about 3 tables with people, and he's there with his people. And he walked up to me, and he said, a bit close to home, Mr. Pleasance, a bit close to home. And I said, well, Nick, where needs must, where needs must. And never another word was said, but they were seething, they were so angry. Just got to do it. You got to have the guts to do it, haven't you? Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. I hope you've enjoyed yourself. I hope you've learned a few more things. Please buy my books, I need the money. And as we said, we're going to organise to send a bulk shipment, so you'll get the books at a good price. The price that I sell in front of people, not online, is because I obviously get more money for that. And I'll sign them. If you tell these guys, they'll take your name and tell me if you want it signed to your name, however you spell it, and I will do so. I'll be very happy to do that. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.